Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Animal Talk Thursday. I'm Dawn Heyman, the co-founder of Spring Farm Cares and animal communicator. And we are here to answer some of your questions. And we are in a room full of cats, so we may have we have some walk-bys and walkthroughs, but live with animals, anything can happen, and anything has happened. So we'll see what happens. We got some clowns in this room, so it might be interesting. All right, and Becca is with me, and Becca is running the camera, but she also is going to be asking the questions. So I'm going to introduce Becca.
Hello, everybody. So we have some interesting questions this week. A lot of them around the topic of animals and their relationships with each other. We've talked a lot about animals and humans communicating, but we haven't really touched on animals communicating with animals. So I'm excited to get into some of these questions. So I think the first one would just be, how do animals communicate with each other?
Okay. So animals communicate with each other the same way we communicate with them, using telepathy. And animals just naturally talk to each other, and they don't find that strange. Humans find that strange, that animals would talk to each other, but they're like, what is the big deal? I mean, this is life. And you don't have to worry, cats don't have to speak dog, and dogs don't have to speak cat. They all just speak to each other. And they communicate in various ways. Now, we watch them, and we can tell they communicate body language-wise. And I want to touch on this because I did this I think our first session I talked about this. But body language is a form of communication. So that is part of it. But they also, they just totally, get each other otherwise and communicate. So they do a lot of communicating with each other. They talk about a lot of things. They talk about the weird humans that interact with them. They can talk about, other cats. They don't tend to sit around and gossip. That's the thing.
I was going to ask.
No, they don't gossip. A lot of people think that. It's really funny. But I don't, they tell me things that are important. So like they'll tell me things that I need to know about, or if another animal's irritating them, they will, they'll voice that concern. And it's just, and it just depends on, where they're at. But I mean, they talk about everything.
Do they tattle on each other, or do they
Sometimes.
tattle on us?
Yes, they do tattle on the staff. Sometimes I don't know who they're tattling on, but they'll tell me, the room isn't to their liking because somebody moved something that we asked them not to move. That happens in one room in particular where I have a three-legged cat and a blind cat. And a lot of times things get moved, and we'll get a complaint. And when I do the close down at night, I'll get a complaint.
So
My
funny.
chair is moved again. And then it might be something I don't notice until they tell me. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
That's so funny. So when it comes to their relationships, I'm curious, do they have relationships similar to humans where they all play they serve a different purpose and a different role, and then maybe these two people have beef with each other and these two people are close? Is it similar to us?
Absolutely. They have relationships just like we do. So we have, let me give you I'll give you a barn example, and then we can do a small animal example. But here's a perfect example. So we had a donkey named Noah who passed away. And we ended up getting another donkey in that was about the same size as Noah. And so Noah had been with another donkey named Murphy, and they were best friends. And so when we knew that Noah was dying, because he had cancer and we knew it was coming, we needed to find another friend for Murphy. And so we brought this donkey in. Now, we didn't have the illusion that he was going to replace Noah and that Murphy wouldn't notice. There was nothing like that. But we thought, same size, this will be good, they'll get along, and they really don't like each other. So it didn't click, and we had to do other things and listen to them as to who they wanted to be with. We can't just assign any species another friend because we think that they'd be perfect together. They might be, but also they have likes and dislikes just like we do. And sometimes, and think about this from a human perspective, because I keep hearing this from people over and over again. I had 2 cats. They don't get along all of a sudden. It happens here. We have rooms of 8, 10, 12 cats. This is a bigger room and has more cats in it. And they could be together for years and all get along, and all of a sudden we have a spat between two of them and they suddenly can't live in the same room. And but if you think about it in human terms, with the relationships that we have, you grow up with siblings potentially, but that doesn't mean you're best friends with them for the rest of your life. And you change, and you develop and mature, and everybody changes and has likes and dislikes. So those relationships will also change. And I think we seem to look at animals and think their relationships are going to be static and it's just going to be that way for their whole life. But it doesn't work that way necessarily.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced, they have a cat or a dog at home and they're like, I'm going to get him a friend.
Yes.
And they pick them out maybe based on breed or something. And
Yep.
then they bring them home and their relationship is just not what
Exactly.
you expected. They end up just being like roommates instead of friends.
Exactly. And I've had this with dogs in my own household where we had a whole group of dogs that everybody got along fine. And then all of a sudden one day, two of the females got in a fight. And it was, after that, they couldn't be in the same room together. I mean, if they even were together for 3 seconds, they went after each other. And it was, in that case, one of them, turned 3 years old, and that changes. There's a maturity that happens, especially in female dogs. But at 3, she suddenly was like going to challenge the boss. And the boss said, you're not going to challenge me. And they never could get past that. So we had to keep them separated. But, so I think, as animals age, that's another thing. You could have 2 animals. I'll pick dogs again because we don't talk about dogs much. We don't have dogs here in the sanctuary anymore. But that doesn't mean they're not a part of our lives. We have dogs on the property because we have our personal dogs. But using dogs as a perfect example, sometimes you have 2 dogs that have a vast age difference. And, when they're 5 and 2 or 5 and 1, it's not a big deal. But when suddenly that 5-year-old is 15, you've got aging issues. They may become arthritic. They hurt more, and they don't want this other dog jumping on them. And that sometimes causes some things. Now, there's a case where you really need to listen to the needs. It's not that they hate each other. It's just that their needs are different. And as humans, we need to help them and adjust that. The older dog needs to make sure, we as humans need to make sure that the older dog isn't pressed, isn't feeling vulnerable by the younger dogs. So it may mean some time out that they need from each other or whatever. But we have to listen to their needs at that point and adjust that. It doesn't mean necessarily the relationship's not going to work. It's just that the needs have changed, and that's another aspect.
Yeah, and maybe we need to take our own expectations of what we want the relationship to be out of the equation.
Yeah, and we humans do that all the time. It's like, well, they always got along before, so, and we just assume that's going to be the way it is, and we try to make that happen when you're dealing with a situation where they just need a time out from each other. And making them adjust isn't going to do anything. Mm-hmm. A relationship is a relationship, and it grows and changes, just like with humans. It's the same thing. And sometimes they hit rocky spells, and it doesn't mean they can never be together again. Sometimes they just have a tiff, they have a difference of opinion. One of them, is short-tempered or whatever and has a little outburst, but it doesn't mean that, oh my God, they can never be together again. So you really have to feel each situation out.
So you said you gave us the barn example. You said you had another example from the hall.
So with cats, again, we will try to fit a cat in a room where we think, oh, this cat will go perfectly in this room. And it's really mellow cats, and we can add this one in there. And for some reason, it's like, gasoline in a match. And you put it in and it doesn't work. And we could just look at this and say, all right, we're going to make this work. Or we try to, sometimes it's a matter of just making an accommodation. And maybe that does work. And other times it's just, you have to admit that was the wrong combination and try something else. We've had cats in here that it's hard to find the right fit for. And sometimes we have to try to move them, to several different rooms and try it out and see which one they like and which other cats accept them. And then that's also hard because you're then submitting them to change constantly, which brings its own stress. So there are all these factors that you really have to consider. But when we are trying to impose what we think it should look like onto them, we get in trouble a lot of times.
Mm. Yeah, and it's not with these rooms, it's not even just the individual relationships. There's a whole like ecosystem,
Yes.
like it's a community,
Absolutely.
which is
Yeah.
complex.
Yeah. And then you have, in the community, you have resources. So you have the favorite cat wheel or the tree or a favorite bed or a favorite place to lay, like, especially if the sun is coming through the window, then everybody wants to be in the sun. And we have rooms here that in the past, I remember one room in particular that like 5 of the cats used to all pile in the same bed together and snuggle up together. We have endless pictures and visitors taking endless pictures of that because it was a huge dog bed, and the cats would just all lie on top of each other, and and they do it all the time. And that was their relationship. They just loved that. They were a real community and a real group. And not all of them do that, you know. So everybody's needs are different.
Do animals, we've talked about this with humans before, about reincarnation and how souls will travel together and they serve different like karmic lessons with each other. Is that the same sometimes with animals? Do their souls also travel together?
Yeah, absolutely. And frequently their souls travel with us as well.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll form different relationships. But yes, a lot of animals come to, travel together. And we've seen that here where 2 cats from completely different situations suddenly show up here, and it's like they instantly know each other, and you see that, and it's mind blowing when you experience that, because it's like, whoa, they're like magnets, and they just suddenly come together, then they're inseparable. But we've seen that many times here.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So when it comes to animals that are not getting along, I'm curious what the communication is like when there's 2 animals that are showing aggression towards each other. Like I'm sure we've all seen dogs that are fighting.
Sure.
It's really intense. Are they also telepathically communicating while they're fighting? Like what does that look like?
So just like with us, when we get angry at something, we tend to not listen and tune out. It's the same with them. They have reactions to things just like we do. Somebody crosses a line. In my own house right now, I have 2 younger dogs. That one is 3 and the other one is just coming out 2. And they were adopted a year apart, and they play really rough together. And the younger male has now gotten bigger in stature than the female, and she's the boss because she's the girl, so she's going to be the boss. And he will overstep sometimes, and he grabs her by a leg or something because they play really hard and they play really rough. But all of a sudden it crosses a line, and all of a sudden it turns into this snarling match. And if we yell, no, stop it, they usually stop it. But then I have a 13-year-old yellow lab that he likes to break up any argument like that by jumping in the middle of it. I don't know what he's thinking, but that usually fuels a problem. So while we don't have aggressive dogs, they're not, they don't have aggressive tendencies. It's just that they get out of control, and the play gets out of control, and one of them tries to take a stance on it, and usually they need our help to balance that out a little bit. They're going through changes at that age, 3 and 2, and they're trying to figure out that relationship still. So there's going to be some of that, but they love each other. They love to play, and they snuggle up together, and so we got to watch the dynamic. Now, when you have 2 animals, this is a touchy topic because it's a little different. You can have dogs that are just aggressive, or cats. Doesn't have to be. It's not just a dog. Horses. It happens in horses too, and it happens in people. You can just have an animal that has aggressive tendencies that can't be with other animals, and they sometimes that is. I don't want to go into all the different reasons that can be, because I don't want to like stereotype somebody and put them in a little hole, but sometimes it's a mental health issue in some of these animals, just like with people. They have mental health issues too. Sometimes it can be a breeding issue, it's genetic, and sometimes it's just a combination of things. And and it can be a disease. And we don't look at this as people. Aggression in dogs is a disease, and it can be. It's not always just a training thing. It sometimes is an organic brain issue. And having lived through that myself with a very young dog, it's a horrific thing to go through. It's just absolutely horrific. And when you get a situation you can't fix, it causes a lot of antagonistic. People get very emotional about this, and there are some people who believe that any aggressive dog can be fixed with the right trainer, but there's oftentimes that is not true. There truly is a chemical imbalance, a brain issue, something that's causing that to happen. Talking to them doesn't change that. Communicating with them doesn't change that. You can't communicate to a dog with aggression or a cat with aggression or a horse with aggression and say, don't do that anymore. They can't help it. So it's something that we either have to make their life safe in a situation where they don't come in contact, where they're going to get triggered, or however it has to be dealt with. But that's a complicated issue. Now you can just get a non-complicated issue where two of them have an argument, and just like with people, they also have likes and dislikes. We have a wonderful herd of donkeys and horses here. They all don't get along. I mean, you would think we have these big pastures where we could just like turn them all out. They don't get along, not all of them. So they prefer to be in these smaller groups together, and the friends like to stay together with each other, and we accommodate that, whatever we have to do. We have multiple pastures fenced off, we have paddock areas, and we have to listen to them as to why. Let me give you a great example. We had 4 horses brought in on an animal cruelty case. Brandy, Bayberry, Cammy, and Colonel, they all came in together, and they were inseparable. They just really needed to see each other for the first several months. We put them all out in a pasture together. And then after they were healing, and they were both physically and emotionally and spiritually, they healed. And pretty soon, the 4 of them actually didn't want to be together anymore. It was really obvious. So 2 of them, Cammy and Colonel, definitely liked each other, and they're still together. They're a pair that we keep together. But Brandy and Bayberry, they didn't want to stay together by any means. They actually don't like each other very much. And so they actually got paired up with other horses that weren't in that group before, and are all happy now in the places where they're at. But for when they first came in, they absolutely wanted to be together. They had a bond of the trauma that they went through together. They survived a really tough situation. They survived by sticking together. So when they came here, they still wanted that. But as time went on, it changed for them. And they all got to pursue what they needed individually. And so our situation changed. And you have to be able to listen to that and accept that and appreciate it and kind of roll with the punches.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the lessons that we talk about here come down to put your preconceived notions as a human to the side and actually listen to them.
Yes. And that's because we think we know the answers because we're the humans. And the other thing is, this is a heart thing. Sometimes we want something to work so badly that we're going to like make it work. and it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dawn. This was a really fascinating conversation. If you're listening now, make sure to say hi. Tell us where you're listening from, and you can always ask questions and we will talk about them in the coming weeks, and we'll see you later.
Great. See you next week.